50,000, 100,000, a crumpled 20, then two faded 10,000 dong notes. Tu Na stood at the scratched glass counter of the village pharmacy, her fingers carefully smoothing out the small worn bills she had just earned from standing all morning at the market, selling sticky rice cakes. "That's exactly 160,000, the pharmacist said, sliding a thin plastic bag across the glass. Inside were 2 blister packs of antibiotics and a small bottle of yellow antiseptic. For a second, Tu Na just stared at the little plastic bag. 160,000. It wasn't a fortune to most, but today it was all the cash she had left. She grabbed the medicine, turned, and hurried down the uneven dirt path leading back to our wooden house. She wasn't running just to save time. She was hurrying because she knew exactly what was waiting for her in the dark, quiet bedroom at the end of the hall. Hello, friends, and welcome back to our family's corner of the world. Life here usually moves at the gentle, predictable pace of the seasons. But sometimes the quietest, most peaceful days are the ones hiding the heaviest burdens. When Tu Na pushed open the wooden gate, the yard was perfectly silent. Little Henry's muddy sandals were lined up neatly on the porch, and the afternoon sun was casting long, warm shadows across the garden. From the outside, everything looked perfectly fine, but inside, the air was thick with unspoken fear. Bartang lay flat on the woven bamboo mat of her bed. Her eyes were squeezed tightly shut, and a thin layer of cold sweat beaded across her deeply lined forehead. As Tu Na's footsteps echoed on the wooden floorboards, Bartang immediately swallowed the low, ragged groan that had been building in her throat. She forced her tired facial muscles to relax, opening her eyes to offer her granddaughter a weak, trembling smile. She was hiding the agonizing pain of a bad fall, completely suppressing her own suffering just to make sure Tu Na could go to the market with peace of mind. It's a heartbreaking, familiar kind of love. The kind where an elder would rather endure physical torment in the dark than become a financial burden to their children in the light. Out in the open-air kitchen, the rhythm of daily life had to continue. Tu Na knelt by the brick hearth, silently feeding dry twigs into the crackling wood fire. A simple clay pot sat on the iron grate, white steam billowing out into the humid afternoon air. She was carefully stirring a pot of minced pork and scallion congee, the softest, most nutritious meal she could afford to make today. Every stir of the wooden spoon felt incredibly heavy. We often talk about the big financial struggles in life, the massive debts, the failing businesses, the grand risks. But there is a very specific, suffocating kind of pressure that comes from counting every single 100,000 dong note. It's the crushing weight of micro-survival, the delicate, fragile reality of a family operating with absolutely zero safety net. Tu Na poured the thick, fragrant congee into a small ceramic bowl. She blew on it softly, carrying it back into the dim bedroom like it was a fragile treasure. "Grandma, you need to eat," Tu Na whispered, sitting gently on the edge of the bamboo bed. "And then, we really need to call a car. We have to go to the district hospital. Just for an X-ray, please." Bartang didn't open her eyes. Her frail, wrinkled hand reached out from under the thin blanket, gently but firmly pushing the warm bowl away. "No hospital." Bartang's voice was barely a raspy whisper, but it carried the stubborn weight of a lifetime of sacrifice. "It's just a bruise. It will pass in a few days. Do you know how much a hospital charges just to look at an old woman's bones? Keep that money for Henry's school. I won't go." Tu Na's hands gripped the warm bowl so tightly her knuckles turned white. The quiet yard outside, usually a source of such deep healing and peace, suddenly felt entirely isolating. The chickens clucked softly in the distance. A gentle breeze rustled the wide banana leaves. But inside these 4 wooden walls, Tu Na was entirely alone with an impossible choice. You cannot negotiate with a medical emergency. You cannot bootstrap your way out of a broken bone or a severe internal injury. Yet here was Bartang, weaponizing her own guilt, willing to risk her long-term mobility just to protect the family's fragile budget. And what Bartang didn't know, what even Tu Na didn't fully realize as she sat there holding the rejected bowl of food, was that the few 100,000 dong they were arguing over was nothing compared to the massive invisible shadow currently hanging over the family. A dangerous, secret shadow that Alex was carrying all by himself. It was mid-afternoon when the low rumble of Alex's motorbike finally broke the quiet of the yard. He cut the engine, the sudden silence feeling heavy as he kicked down the kickstand. He looked exhausted, his shoulders carrying a rigid weight that went far beyond a long day of physical labor. Dust coated his heavy work boots, tracking softly across the wooden floorboards as he made his way directly to the back bedroom. Inside, the air was stifling. The smell of strong herbal oil hung thick in the room. A desperate, cheap remedy Tu Na had rubbed onto Bartang's swollen leg, hoping it would perform a miracle they simply couldn't afford to buy. Alex knelt beside the low bamboo bed. The moment Bartang heard his heavy, familiar breathing, she reached out. Her frail, trembling fingers found his thick, calloused hands, gripping them with a surprising, desperate strength. Tears welled up in the old woman's deeply sunken eyes, catching the faint light filtering through the window slats. "Thank you, son," she whispered, her voice cracking with raw, unshielded emotion. "Tu Na marrying you. It is our family's greatest blessing. You always protect us. You take such good care of my girl." For a long, agonizing moment, the room was perfectly still. To Bartang, she was looking at the absolute bedrock of their family. But inside Alex's chest, those words felt like 1,000 rusted needles piercing directly into his lungs. He froze, forcing his facial muscles into a gentle, reassuring nod, while his stomach violently twisted into knots. Here is a quiet, terrifying truth about being a family protector. Praise can hurt far more than criticism when you know you are living a lie. As Bartang's frail hand stroked his knuckles, Alex was silently suffocating under the crushing irony. She was sacrificing her own body, enduring blinding physical pain to save a few 100,000 dong, completely unaware that the very roof over her head, the wooden floorboards beneath her bed, had been secretly mortgaged to dangerous, unforgiving creditors. He wasn't their savior. Standing in that dim room, he felt like the man who had silently placed them all directly in the path of a hurricane. Alex gently pulled his hands away, his voice kept artificially steady. "Grandma, you need to let me take you to the district hospital, just for an X-ray. We can't leave this alone." Instantly, Bartang's warm gratitude vanished, replaced by a fierce, panicked stubbornness. "Absolutely not," she snapped, wincing heavily as the sudden movement sent a fresh wave of agony through her hip. "I know my body. It's just bruised. If you take me there, they will invent problems. They will drain whatever little money you and Tu Na have managed to save. I forbid it, Alex. Do you hear me?" Alex looked up at Tu Na, who was standing quietly in the doorway, the rejected bowl of congee still held tightly in her hands. Her eyes were exhausted, silently pleading with him to fix this impossible stalemate. For a moment, Alex just looked at the two women he loved most, watching them suffer in this suffocating trap of poverty. And then a profound shift happened behind his eyes. In family business, we often talk about minimizing overhead and cutting costs to survive. We try to bootstrap our way through hard times. But there is a fatal, devastating flaw in that mindset. You cannot bootstrap human health. When your emergency fund is zero, a single physical accident doesn't just hurt a body. It instantly shatters the financial and psychological foundation of the entire household. You cannot negotiate with a bone fracture. You cannot wait out a medical crisis with patience, silence, and hard work. Alex stopped arguing. He didn't raise his voice, and he didn't try to logically comfort Bartang anymore. He simply turned around and walked out of the dim bedroom, stepping out onto the sunlit porch. Little Henry was sitting on the wooden steps, quietly tracing circles in the dirt with a stick, deeply sensing the tense atmosphere. Alex gently patted his son's head, pulled out his worn smartphone, and stared at the cracked screen. His fingers were trembling slightly, not from a fear of hospitals, but from the terrifying reality of what came next. Without hesitating, he dialed the emergency number, ordering an ambulance directly from the city down to their rural village. He knew the cost would be staggering. He knew it would add another heavy stone to his already crushing mountain of secret debt. But as he listened to the line ring, his jaw set. He would absorb the cost. He would face the creditors. He would do whatever it took, because letting the matriarch of his family suffer to save a few dollars was a line he absolutely refused to cross. The sudden wail of the ambulance siren cut sharply through the peaceful rural evening, a sound so profoundly foreign and terrifying in our quiet village. Harsh red and blue lights flashed wildly against the weathered wooden walls of the house, casting long, frantic shadows across the dirt yard. As the paramedics rushed through the bamboo gate with a stretcher, Bartang completely panicked. She slapped weakly at the thin blankets, desperately trying to sit up, her voice cracking as she scolded Alex about the unforgivable waste of money. Alex didn't argue. He didn't try to reason with her anymore. Without a single word, he leaned down, slid his strong, calloused arms under her frail frame, and physically lifted his grandmother onto the waiting stretcher. Tu Na stood absolutely frozen in the doorway, clutching a towel. She watched her husband's face illuminated in the flashing emergency lights. What she saw wasn't just a grandson's standard worry. In Alex's eyes, there was a strange, haunted desperation. It was the look of a man fighting a massive, invisible war, holding fiercely on to this one physical moment because it was the only crisis he could actually control. He wasn't just lifting Bartang, he was desperately trying to keep the entire foundation of their family from collapsing. And in that silent, heavy exchange of glances, Tu Na deeply realized her husband was carrying a burden far heavier than she ever knew. Hours later, the harsh, sterile, fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor felt strangely comforting. The doctor finally emerged holding a crisp X-ray film, confirming their greatest hope. It was only a minor hairline fracture. No invasive surgery was required. Just rest, a cast, and a surprisingly manageable medical bill that wouldn't ruin them. Alex let out a long, shuddering breath he felt he had been holding for months. He slumped heavily onto the cold metal bench, burying his exhausted face in his hands. By midnight, they were finally back home. The wooden house was quiet again, but this time it was a warm, healing silence. Bartang slept peacefully in a proper cast, safe and fully cared for. Tu Na gently placed a thick blanket over her, then walked out to the porch where Alex was sitting alone in the dark. She didn't ask any demanding questions. She simply sat close beside him, leaning her tired head against his shoulder. True family happiness isn't the magical absence of trouble, it's the absolute certainty that when the storm hits, you will not face it alone. They survived the immediate physical crisis today. They protected the matriarch's health, because that is the one foundation you can never compromise in life. But as Alex looked out into the pitch-black garden, feeling his wife's comforting warmth against his side, a quiet, lingering dread remained. Tomorrow, he still had to face the ruthless creditors. Tomorrow, the invisible storm would finally reach their front door. Have you ever had to hide a heavy burden to protect the people you love? Share your experience in the comments below. If our family's journey resonates with you, please like this video and tell us your thoughts.